You think the Cleavers were the perfect family? Behind that spotless kitchen hid lies, jealousy, and one scandal that nearly ended the show. These 21 secrets expose the dark side of America's favorite household. 21. The iconic Cleaver house isn't where you think it is. That famous two-story home, the one we associate so deeply with the Cleaver family, has a surprisingly nomadic and public life. The exterior shots of the house, seen in the show's early seasons, were of a real house located at 1764 Buckingham Road in Los Angeles. However, for most of the series, the production used a studio facade built on the Republic Studios lot. When the show moved to Universal Studios, a new facade was built on their backlot, specifically on a street that would become famously known as Colonial Street. This is where things get interesting. After Leave It to Beaver wrapped, that same house facade, with a few modifications here and there, became a regular Hollywood player. It appeared in numerous other TV shows and movies. Most famously, it was later repurposed to become the home of another iconic TV family, the Munsters, at 1313 Mockingbird Lane. And in the 2000s, it got another major role as the home of Susan Mayer on Desperate Housewives. So, that symbol of perfect 50s suburbia has also been home to friendly monsters and modern-day drama. It's a strange thought that the same front door June Cleaver walked through in her pearls was later navigated by Herman Munster and a desperate housewife. 20. The show was a giant advertisement for Chrysler. Did you ever notice that the Cleavers, and nearly everyone else in Mayfield, drove pristine, brand new cars? This was no accident. The show had a very lucrative sponsorship deal with Chrysler Corporation. As a result, almost every vehicle you see in the series is a Plymouth, a Dodge, or another Chrysler product. Ward Cleaver, a man of modest means working in an office, somehow managed to have a brand new Plymouth Fury or Belvedere every single season. This was a subtle but powerful form of product placement, long before it became a common industry practice. The cars were always gleaming, always the latest model, and always presented as an integral part of the American dream. The sponsorship was so strict that if any other car brand appeared in a shot, its logo had to be obscured. This wasn't just a story about a family, it was a carefully curated commercial for the idyllic suburban lifestyle, and Chrysler wanted to make sure their products were seen as the official transportation for that dream. 19. Barbara Billingsley's pearls weren't just a fashion statement.
Cute. Is that why nobody likes you, Eddie?
Shut up, fat boy. Boys. Yes, Mrs. Cleaver? Boys, I'm going to have some sandwiches for you in a little while.
Oh, thanks, Mom.
Don't put any mayonnaise on mine, Mrs. Cleaver.
June Cleaver's pearls are as iconic as her aprons and perfectly coiffed hair. She wore them constantly, whether she was baking a cake, vacuuming the living room, or reprimanding the boys. It became a symbol of her effortless grace and class, the picture of the perfect 50s homemaker. But the reason for the pearls was far more practical than stylistic. Barbara Billingsley had a small, hollow indentation in her neck, right at the base of her throat, which she was self-conscious about. She felt it was distracting on camera, especially under the harsh studio lights. To cover it up, she started wearing a simple, elegant string of pearls. The producers loved the look so much that it became a permanent part of June's wardrobe. It's a fascinating detail because it reveals that even the most seemingly perfect aspect of this idealized character was, in reality, a clever trick to hide a very human insecurity. The image of perfection was, quite literally, constructed to cover up a perceived flaw. 18. Hugh Beaumont, Ward Cleaver, was a licensed minister and disliked his role. Ward Cleaver was the quintessential TV dad, patient, wise, and always available to dispense gentle, moral guidance. The actor who played him, Hugh Beaumont, was uniquely qualified for this role, though perhaps not in the way you'd think. Beaumont was an ordained Methodist minister. He had a degree in theology from the University of Southern California and often preached at churches in his community. This background undoubtedly helped him imbue Ward with a sense of moral authority and calm wisdom. However, the irony is that Beaumont didn't particularly enjoy his acting career, especially his role as Ward. He saw acting primarily as a job to support his family. He often felt the scripts were too simplistic and that the character of Ward was a bit of a know-it-all. After the show ended, he largely retired from acting and focused on other pursuits, including running a Christmas tree farm. It's a jarring realization for fans who saw him as the perfect father figure. The man playing the role was often just punching the clock, waiting to get back to his true passions. 17. Tony Dow, Wally, had zero acting experience and was a champion diver.
Your father did very well in school, and I got good grades. You had a grandfather that was a professor. Why, he was considered practically a genius.
Yeah, it's nice having all that smart stuff in the family, Mom. I just hope it didn't all get worn out before it came to me.
When you watch Tony Dow as Wally Cleaver, he seems like a natural. He perfectly captured the awkwardness, earnestness, and quiet charm of an American teenager. But Dow was not a trained actor. In fact, he had no real ambition to be one. His background was in athletics. He was a junior Olympics diving champion. He landed the role of Wally almost by accident. He had accompanied a friend to an audition and, on a whim, decided to try out himself. The producers were immediately taken with his genuine, unpolished quality, which they felt was perfect for the role of the older Cleaver brother. This lack of professional training is likely what made his performance so authentic. He wasn't acting like a teenager. He was a teenager, navigating a new and unfamiliar world right there on camera. It also explains why, after the show, he struggled with the identity of being Wally and later found more fulfillment as a director and a talented sculptor. 16. Ken Osmond, Eddie Haskell, became a real-life police officer. Eddie Haskell is arguably one of the most memorable characters in television history. He was the quintessential troublemaker, the sycophantic friend, who was sickeningly sweet to the adults. "Good evening, Mrs. Cleaver. You're looking lovely today," and a conniving instigator the moment their backs were turned. Ken Osmond played the part so perfectly that he became typecast, finding it nearly impossible to get other acting roles. So, what did the ultimate on-screen delinquent do? He joined the Los Angeles Police Department. In 1970, Osmond became a police officer, serving for over a decade. He grew a mustache to be less recognizable and worked in various divisions, including traffic and vice. In 1970, he was shot 3 times during a foot chase with a suspected car thief. He was saved by his bulletproof vest and a well-placed belt buckle. The irony is staggering. The character who represented suburban rebellion and deceit spent his adult life upholding the very laws he so gleefully flouted on screen. 15. The original pilot episode was radically different and a little creepy.
Leave it to Beaver. Starring Barbara Billingsley, Hugh Beaumont, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
When you're young, there are some things you have to learn. How to catch a baseball.
The first episode of Leave It to Beaver that ever aired was Beaver Gets Spelled, but it wasn't the first one filmed. The original pilot, titled It's a Small World, was produced in 1957 and featured a different cast and a noticeably different tone. While Jerry Mathers was still the Beaver, the roles of Ward and Wally were played by other actors. More significantly, the tone was less comedic and more like a serious family drama. Ward was gruffer, the family dynamic was more strained, and the whole episode had a somber feel. The pilot never aired as part of the original series and was considered lost for decades until it was rediscovered in the 80s. Watching it today is an eerie experience. It's like seeing a distorted reflection of the family we know and love, a glimpse into an alternate universe where the Cleavers weren't quite so perfect, and their problems weren't so easily solved with a glass of milk and a gentle chat. 14. The writers shamelessly mined their own children's lives for storylines.
Pryor took a note home and was expelled. I'll bet you're gonna get it. They'll throw you right out of school. Won't they throw him out of school?
The reason so many of the show's plots felt so authentic and relatable is because they were. The show's creators and primary writers, Joe Connolly and Bob Mosher, drew heavily from their own experiences as fathers. They based the characters of Wally and the Beaver on their own sons, and many of the classic predicaments like getting stuck in a giant soup bowl on a billboard or hiding a pet alligator in the toilet were inspired by real, or at least exaggerated, events from their own family lives. Connolly even named the character the Beaver after a childhood nickname of one of his own shipmates. While this gave the show its charm and realism, it also meant that the writers' children were essentially living their lives as unwitting research material for a national television show. Imagine getting into trouble at school, only to see a fictionalized version of your mishap broadcast to millions of viewers a few months later. 13. The show's timeline makes absolutely no sense. For a show grounded in the reality of family life, Leave It to Beaver plays fast and loose with time. If you pay close attention, the ages and grade levels of the characters are wildly inconsistent. In one episode, Beaver will be in a certain grade, and then several episodes later, he'll still be in the same grade, even though a summer vacation has supposedly passed. The layout of the Cleaver house also seems to change at will. The location of the staircase, the number of bedrooms, and the arrangement of the furniture often shift from one season to the next without any explanation. Of course, these are common continuity errors in television production, but in a show that prided itself on its realism, it's a funny reminder that Mayfield was still a fictional world where the laws of time, space, and interior design were subject to the needs of the weekly script. 12. The show wasn't cancelled by the network, it was cancelled by the cast and crew.
He was a wisecracker named Frankie, and he was played by Harry Shearer of Saturday Night Live.
What are you trying to do? Give me the business? Nobody gives away bikes for bottle caps. Cleaver, you're worse than your brother. You're a creep, too. Telling him.
Gee whiz, Lisa, it could have changed the whole history of that show.
Gosh golly, Rob, you're right.
Now, that lost pilot episode will air on WTBS on October 4th. It's the first time it's been shown since 1958.
Hello. This is a very special day for us.
Leave It to Beaver was never a massive, top 10 ratings hit during its original run, but it was consistently popular and had a loyal audience. It could have likely continued for several more seasons. However, the decision to end the show after 6 seasons came from within. By 1963, Jerry Mathers was about to enter high school and was eager to experience a normal teenage life away from the studio. Tony Dow was also ready to move on. The writers and producers felt that the show had run its natural course. The central premise, the innocent scrapes of a young boy, was becoming unsustainable as the actors aged. So, rather than being forced off the air by low ratings, the team behind Leave It to Beaver made the rare and respectable decision to end the show on their own terms, preserving the integrity of its core concept. 11. The grand finale was a disappointing clip show. For a show that had created so many heartwarming and memorable moments, its final episode was a surprisingly lazy and anticlimactic affair. The last episode, titled Family Scrapbook, is what's known as a clip show. The plot is minimal. The Cleavers are looking through an old photo album and reminiscing about past events. The majority of the episode is simply made up of flashbacks to scenes from earlier seasons. There is no grand conclusion, no emotional farewell to the characters, and no real sense of closure. It was a cheap and easy way to produce a final episode without having to write a full new script. For loyal viewers who had followed the family for 6 years, it must have been a rather hollow ending. The Cleaver family, which had become a part of the American cultural fabric, simply faded away with a series of old memories rather than a proper goodbye. 10. Frank Bank, Lumpy Rutherford, lived a life that would make Ward Cleaver blush.
Tony Dow. And Jerry Mathers as the Beaver.
Clarence Lumpy Rutherford was the oafish, bumbling friend of Wally, often depicted as a gentle giant who was easily led astray. The actor who played him, Frank Bank, lived a life that was anything but oafish. In his autobiography, Call Me Lumpy, Bank claimed to have been an astonishingly successful womanizer. Estimating he had slept with over 1,000 women, he detailed a very active social life that stood in stark contrast to the wholesome world of Mayfield. After his acting career fizzled out, he became a highly successful stockbroker and financial planner, managing money for many of his old Hollywood friends, including Jerry Mathers and Barbara Billingsley. So, the character who was often portrayed as not being the sharpest tool in the shed was, in reality, a shrewd businessman and a prolific ladies' man. 9. It was the first American TV show to show a toilet. This might sound trivial today.
Losing things is one of the few lessons you don't have to learn. And that's our story tonight on Leave It to Beaver.
But in the ultra-conservative world of 50s television, it was a groundbreaking and controversial moment. Network censors were incredibly strict about what could be shown or even implied on screen. Bathrooms were a particularly taboo subject. In the episode Captain Jack, Beaver and Wally buy a baby alligator and decide to hide it in the only place they think their parents won't look, the toilet tank. To make the scene work, the producers had to show the top of the toilet. They fought a long and hard battle with the network censors, who were horrified at the idea of a toilet appearing on primetime television. The producers eventually won, but they were only allowed to show the tank and not the bowl. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Leave It to Beaver, the most wholesome and inoffensive show imaginable, was a broadcast pioneer in bathroom visibility. 8. The pressure of being the perfect kids took a toll on the actors. Jerry Mathers and Tony Dow were expected to be as wholesome and well-behaved off-screen as their characters were on-screen. They were public figures, held up as role models for an entire generation of American children. This created an immense amount of pressure. They had to maintain a squeaky clean image at all times, knowing that any misstep could tarnish the show's reputation. After the series ended, both actors struggled to escape the shadow of their iconic roles. Tony Dow, in particular, suffered from clinical depression for many years, which he later attributed in part to the identity crisis he experienced after being Wally for so long. The public's refusal to see him as anyone else was a heavy burden to carry. It's a sobering reminder that the idealized children we loved on TV were real kids, dealing with unreal expectations. 7. Mayfield had a subtle but rigid class system.
Isn't there something I can do?
Yeah, you can stop bothering your brother.
Will you pay me 25 cents an hour for not bothering him?
I will not. Now you run along.
I think I'm going to go see how some of the other guys are doing.
While Mayfield appears to be a uniform, middle-class paradise, a closer look reveals a subtle but undeniable class structure. The Cleavers are squarely in the comfortable, white-collar middle class. Ward has a respectable office job, and they live in a nice home. Then you have families like the Rutherfords, Lumpy's family, where Fred Rutherford is Ward's pompous colleague, representing a slightly higher, more status-conscious tier of the middle class. But the show also features characters who are clearly from a lower economic bracket. Characters like Larry Mondello and the rambunctious Violet Rutherford are often depicted as coming from less polished, working-class backgrounds. Their homes are smaller, their parents are less refined, and their behavior is often contrasted with the Cleavers' polite decorum. The show never explicitly addresses class, but it's always there in the background, subtly reinforcing the idea that the Cleavers' way of life is the aspirational norm. 6. The role of women was incredibly limited and defined.
No, that only happens on New Year's Eve.
Well, I have to set the table up, honey. You better see what that is.
Yeah.
This may not be a shocking revelation to a modern audience, but it's a crucial part of deconstructing the show's perfect image. June Cleaver, for all her warmth and intelligence, exists almost entirely within the confines of her home. Her world revolves around her husband and children. We rarely see her engage in activities outside of her domestic duties. The same is true for nearly every other female character on the show. The mothers are homemakers, the teachers are spinsters, and the young girls are primarily interested in dolls and tea parties. While this was a reflection of the societal norms of the era, the show actively reinforced these stereotypes. It presented a world where a woman's fulfillment was derived solely from her ability to maintain a perfect home and support her family, a vision that seems profoundly one-dimensional and restrictive today. 5. The pervasive and false rumor of Jerry Mather's death in Vietnam. This is one of the most persistent and bizarre urban legends in television history. In the late 60s, a rumor began to circulate that Jerry Mathers, the actor who played the Beaver, had been killed in action during the Vietnam War. The story became so widespread that it was even reported as fact in some newspapers. In reality, Mathers was alive and well. He had enlisted in the Air Force National Guard to avoid being drafted into a combat role, and he served his time stateside. The rumor was so powerful and enduring that Mathers had to spend years convincing people that he was, in fact, not dead. The legend likely started because of the stark contrast between the innocent Beaver and the harsh reality of the Vietnam War. It was a strange, morbid way for a generation to process the loss of the innocence that his character represented. 4. The darkness behind the perfect dad.
What are you looking for?
I lost one of my wings.
Oh. One of your wings?
Hugh Beaumont presented an image of unflappable calm and wisdom as Ward Cleaver. His real life, however, was marked by significant personal tragedy and struggle. In 1967, his mother-in-law, who lived with his family, died suddenly. Shortly after, his son, who was serving in Vietnam, suffered a traumatic experience that would affect him for the rest of his life. These events, combined with the pressures of his career, took a heavy toll on Beaumont. He and his wife eventually divorced, and he later suffered a debilitating stroke in 1972 that effectively ended his acting career. The man who solved every problem with a quiet talk in the study was, in reality, facing profound and unsolvable challenges in his own life. It's a powerful and poignant reminder that the serene facade of television perfection often conceals deep, real-world pain. 3. The unfortunate double meaning of the name, Beaver. The creators of the show, Connolly and Mosher, claimed the nickname The Beaver came from one of Beaver's older brother's mispronunciations of his real name, Theodore. It was meant to be an innocent, boyish moniker. However, by the time the show was in production, Beaver had already become a well-known and rather vulgar slang term. The writers and producers were fully aware of this double entendre. In fact, they found it amusing and thought it was a funny, inside joke. They even played on it subtly in the show's pilot script, which included a line about the name that was later cut by censors. While the show itself remained completely wholesome, it's a bit jarring to realize that the name of its sweet, innocent protagonist was chosen with a wink and a nod to a piece of crude slang. It's a small, dirty secret hiding in plain sight. 2. Eddie Haskell was so convincing that he was hated in real life.
Jerry Mathers, Tony Dow, Barbara Billingsley, and Hugh Beaumont became American icons as members of one of our most popular TV families on Leave It to Beaver.
Right.
Rumor has it that the long-lost pilot episode features 2 different actors in 2 of the lead roles.
No.
We found out that in the original pilot, Beaver's brother Wally...
Ken Osmond's portrayal of Eddie Haskell was a masterclass in character acting. He was so effective at playing the two-faced suck-up that the public had trouble separating the actor from the role. While kids might have found Eddie amusing, many adults genuinely despised him. Osmond reported being accosted by strangers on the street who would lecture him about his bad behavior. He was denied service at stores and treated with suspicion by people who believed he was just like his character. The producers even had to intervene at times to remind the public that Osmond was a professional actor playing a part. This deep-seated hatred from the audience is the ultimate compliment to his acting ability. But it was also a heavy burden for a young man to carry. He created a character so vividly unlikable that people forgot he was a person at all. 1. The show's greatest secret is that its perfection became an unattainable burden.
Jerry Mathers, Tony Dow, Barbara Billingsley, and Hugh Beaumont became American icons as members of one of our most popular TV families on Leave It to Beaver.
Right.
Rumor has it that the long-lost pilot episode...
This is the secret that truly ruins the childhood memory of Leave It to Beaver, because it reframes the entire show. The series wasn't just entertainment, it became a cultural standard. The Cleavers weren't just a family, they were the family. They presented a vision of American life that was clean, orderly, and morally unambiguous. Every problem had a neat solution. Every conflict was resolved with love and understanding, and every day ended in harmony. But this vision was a fantasy. It was a carefully constructed ideal that ignored the messiness, the complexities, and the struggles of real family life. For the generations that grew up watching it, the show created an impossible benchmark. Real fathers weren't as patient as Ward. Real mothers didn't look flawless while baking cookies. Real families had arguments that weren't resolved in 22 minutes. By presenting this sanitized version of reality as the norm, the show inadvertently created a sense of inadequacy and failure for millions of real families who couldn't live up to the Cleaver standard. The most profound secret of Leave It to Beaver is that its greatest strength, its comforting perfection, was also its most damaging legacy. It gave us a beautiful dream of family life, but in doing so, it made our own, imperfect realities feel like a disappointment, and realizing that the idyllic world of Mayfield was not just a fiction, but a burden, changes how we see those black and white reruns forever. They are no longer just a window into a simpler time, but a mirror reflecting an ideal that was never real to begin with.